Hello, thank you for joining. My name is Bruce Miller, and I'm with RimTech Consulting. And today's topic is the infamous preservation hold library. So this appeals to those of you who are using Purview. It's very much a Purview feature. So this is going to be a Purview topic. And this is a educational webinar, not a typical webinar where we're trying to sell you anything. So feel free to unmute and ask questions at any time. Otherwise, I'll set aside time at the end for any questions you might have. So I start all my webinars the same way with a chat about compliance and what the heck it really means. We kind of had to be on the same page about that before we talk about any features of any EDRMS project. So to me, compliance means three things. Number one is that every document in SharePoint adheres to or complies with the retention schedule. So it has a retention rule assigned to it. Number two is all the documents are being managed as records. Now, notice what I never said. I never said they are records. I said they're being managed as records, which to me is what's much more important. And that in turn means that the documents are immutable. They cannot be edited or deleted. It means that the retention rule is assigned and that in 60% or more of the cases, these records will be event-based or what we call case records. So you have to have all these events and trigger dates at your disposal and entered into the software in order to do a disposition. And that leads me to number three, which is, can you do a disposition? In my personal opinion, the vast majority of EDRMS projects around the world are failures. Why? Because they can't do a disposition. Why not? Because the accuracy of the classification is below a minimum acceptable threshold of 85%. Okay? And this is not a fixable problem, which you'll see why in a moment. Okay? But this is what, to me, compliance means. So let's look at some numbers. A typical modern EDRMS user typically creates 12 records a day. That's 50 inbound emails, of which 20% typically are records, and 2 non-emails per day, total of 12. So if you have 1,000 users, that's 12,000 records a day that flow towards you like water on a beach. It's a daily flow. Digital records are a daily flow, not a static pile of boxes. It's a flow, right? So for 1,000 users, we're looking at 2.7 million per year. So what does that mean? Well, at 12,000 a day, if the records manager wanted to do anything with those records, even just so much as check on them to see if they're accurately classified, assuming it would take 1 minute per record, you would need 25 days, 8-hour days of work just to check 1 day's worth of records. So what does that mean? Well, that means that you have no hope of ever touching the records. It's just not going to happen. Now, here's another cold reality, which is if we take one document and present it to 10 users and ask them, is this a record? And if so, where does it go in the retention schedule? For 10 users, you'll probably get up to 10 different answers. And if you wait 2 months and show them the same document, same 2 questions, you'll get different answers a couple months later. So what can we conclude from that? We can conclude that we cannot really count on users to do this. So that leads to this question, which is, what is the source of compliance? Well, there are 2 schools of thought. One says end users, they have a responsibility, it's often enshrined in policy, to manage their records. What does that mean? That means they had to identify which documents are records, and then they have to classify them against the retention schedule, and ideally put them somewhere safe, right? That's what it means. The other school of thought says you must be off your rocker. There is no way this is going to happen. If I depend on users to do this, I'll never hit my 85% minimum threshold. So therefore, compliance is something we need to impose on users. If they don't like the retention rule, tough. Rules are rules. That's it. Okay. So the organization has to do all the work, not the users. Which way is correct? The latter. We need to impose it. It's the only way it'll ever work. In my entire career, I've never seen it work manually ever, and I don't think I ever will. Now, the bad news about Purview is that when you take it out of the box, what I call its posture is it is all record keeping comes from end users. This is wrong. I guarantee you it will fail, and you have to fix that. So the way you deploy Purview is not the way they intended you to deploy it. You have to do it so that record keeping is imposed on users, not the other way around. Okay? So at 12,000 records a day, that means the records manager cannot get involved, can never see any more records. It's too many. Secondly, is we can't rely on the users to do this. So where does that leave us? With automation. We're going to have to automate this thing. There's no question. So it means that your retention schedule will never be seen or used by humans, ever. It's only going to be loaded into Purview and used automatically. And you, the records manager, will never touch digital records because the volume and the velocity is too high. You can't. Forget about it. So what are the consequences of all this? It means that you have to take the users out of the picture and impose compliance on them. It means you as a records manager will never touch any more records. And the system is going to have to guarantee in a way that you can prove it to be accurate above 85%. Easily done. I have YouTube videos on it. Go watch them. It shows exactly how to do it. Okay. And it's absolutely essential. And in my view, the only way to ever make an EDRMS successful. Because if you let 3, 4, 5 years go by and you find out through a sample that you're probably 50% accuracy, that means you're going to have to correct millions of records, and that's not possible. It's not going to happen. So it's a non-fixable problem if you let it go below 85%. So here are the three things we have to put together for any EDRMS solution. You've got to take your retention schedule and smash it with a hammer and rebuild it so that it's software ready. And I have YouTube videos on how to do that. You have to purchase one of these 5 products and you have to apply it to SharePoint. Okay, that's what it takes. Now, this is the part that really disturbs me greatly, which is too many records professionals think that all we have to do is to get that retention schedule into Purview and we're good to go. No, you're not good to go. Not at all. In fact, putting your retention rules into Purview is going to do nothing for you. What makes it work, and this is equally true for all 5 products, not just Purview, are content rules. What the heck are content rules? They're rules that say for this content in SharePoint, apply this retention rule to those documents. Okay? In other words, the content rules are doing stuff. They are classifying the right documents with the right retention rules. You have to sit down and write them. And in a typical 1,000-user project, it would be over 2,000 of those rules typically. So each of the 5 vendors, software vendors, have different names for their content rules, but they all make the same approach. They're all built the same way. No content rules, no EDRMS, right? So that's where the real work, and that's why I call it the beating heart of the EDRMS. And I have a YouTube video called just that. It's called The Beating Heart of an EDRMS. Go view it, and you'll see how to create these content rules. So now that brings us to the topic of the day, which is immutability. Well, I thought we were talking about preservation of whole library. Yeah, but that's all about immutability, right? Again, immutability says neither the document nor its associated metadata can be edited or deleted. That's what immutability means. Why is it so important? Well, for these 7 reasons. I don't need to read out what's on the screen, but suffice to say that if you go into court and you print out couple thousand documents off your file share and you present them as evidence, the opposing lawyer can say to the judge, can you prove that these documents have not been altered before you brought them into court? And if you cannot say yes, if you say no, I cannot prove it, then there's a very good chance that almost a certainty that they can say, okay, this is not trustworthy evidence, dismiss the evidence, and it will be dismissed every single time. Okay? So we need to preserve the integrity. That's what immutability accomplishes, preserves the integrity of the record throughout its lifetime. In the old days, we had boxes of paper that were kept behind locked doors, and you couldn't exactly sneak in at 3 in the morning with a paintbrush and a bucket of liquid paper and start editing those documents. But you sure can do just that with the digital documents, and no one will be any the wiser, right? So be careful. That's why immutability is important. The only riddle is, okay, we know we have to get there. We have to make it immutable, but when? And that sets up the perfect conflict here between the records manager and the user. The user, they say, what? If it's locked down, I can't make any changes to it. That's a real inconvenience to me. And I can't even fix my mistakes that I didn't catch. No, I don't want this. So they want to push this far into the future as possible. Ideally, never, no lockdown. The records manager, on the other hand, their role is to protect the integrity of the record. So they need it locked down sooner the better, right? Exact opposites. Who wins? The answer is the records manager. This is what it's all about. Compliance. You want to be compliant? A key part of that is immutability. So this is what led to the PHL, the Preservation Hold Library. It's Microsoft's attempt to not win, but to resolve this battle, this conflict between early declaration. Declaration means lock it down and assign a retention code to it, and late declaration, what I call a deferred declaration. So that's the reason for PHLs. The principle is simple, which is if the document in SharePoint is under retention, and I'm going to explain what that means in a minute, but if it's under retention and anybody touches it, meaning edit it or delete it, then Purview will automatically make a copy of it in the cloud. And that copy in the cloud is called a preservation copy. And it's stored in a place called the preservation hold library. So I'm going to be using PC, preservation copy, and PHL, preservation hold library acronyms quite a bit. So that's the principle behind it. Why did they do that? Because they wanted both to be happy. They wanted the records manager to be happy and satisfied, as well as the end user. Do I think it worked out well? No, I don't. But anyway, that's the purpose of the PHL, okay? So what does it mean to say that the document is under retention? Well, it means one of four things are being done to that document. Number one has a retention, it's under the influence of a retention policy. So it might be sitting in a library in SharePoint somewhere, and above it, maybe for the whole site or the whole library, there's a retention policy that says keep for 5 years and delete. Okay? So it's under retention because it's being kept, retained for 5 years. Okay? Retention policies are bad, they're evil, do not use them. Why not? Because they compete with retention labels, which is what you do want to use. And you can learn more about that in my YouTube video. I forget the exact title, but the topic is retention labels. And there's another one just about how to deploy Purview. So either one will show the story. So it can have a retention policy in play. There can be a retention label at play. What's the difference? Because a retention label can say keep 5 years and destroy. A retention policy can say keep 5 years and destroy. The difference is that the policy is applying that rule to a place, not a thing. And it affects all the things underneath that place. And that place can be an entire SharePoint or a site or a library or a folder. Okay. So uh, a retention label, on the other hand, can be the same rule, keep 5 years, then destroy, but it's applied to a thing, not a place. So it's a sticky label that you can apply to a document. Okay. And that's the right way to do it. That's what we want. And number three and number four, a litigation or an e-discovery hold, they're different, but it's a hold. So if any of those four are in play on that document, wherever it is in SharePoint, then it will have a preservation copy created if you ever delete it or edit it. Okay. So what exactly triggers this copy to the PHL? Well, it's an edit, a delete, or a replace of the document. If you alter the metadata, it does not trigger a change. Now, throughout the documentation and even on screen, at several points it says it does, but I think they just haven't caught up with the documentation changes because I spoke with them recently and they said that this is now a permanent feature of Purview. You'll always be able to alter the metadata no matter what. Okay? To me, that's a compliance violation. But anyway, it is what it is. We're going to have to live with that. Okay. So exactly how often does Purview generate a PHL? Well, you got to realize that there are two streams of versions going on here. One is the document version, which is the major minor version numbering schema applied to a document. It's something we're all familiar with. But in the PHL, there's a whole nother set of versions. Those are called record versions. Okay. How often are they created? Well, it's an internal algorithm by Microsoft that I don't know that much about, but they do say that it starts with a committed modification. What is a committed modification? Well, let's say you have a document that's sitting at version 7. You sit down at your desk at 10 in the morning and start revising it in SharePoint. You keep changing it and changing it. By 11 o'clock, it will have automatically incremented the version. It could have gone to version 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, doesn't matter. It will have incremented the version. That's called a committed modification. But if you look at it from minute to minute, it might not create another version, right? From 10:05 to 10:06, you've made 13 changes, but no version has been incremented. But an hour later, it decides, okay, you've made enough changes. I'm going to increment the version number. That's called a committed modification. Okay. So the versions of a document are different than the versions of the record versions. It's a different stream. Now, this is Microsoft's official table on what are the circumstances that lead to a copy being put into PHL. Okay. And I only wanted to bring your attention to one, which is this business of the change in metadata. You notice the table says if there's a change in the metadata, then it adds an item to the PHL, right? Fine, but it shouldn't allow a change to the metadata, in my opinion, anyway. Okay. So what does it look like from a document user's point of view? Well, this is the document level version history right here. So a user by default in SharePoint can unlock a locked record. You've used the retention label and you declared it to be a record, which made it immutable, but they can unlock it. Then they can make all the changes they want while it's unlocked, even delete it. And then they should relock it. If they unlock it, then this word record appears in the version history, the document level version history, just as a reminder, I guess. But know this, there's no mechanism to force a relock. So if the user doesn't think or doesn't bother to relock it, it will stay unlocked for life. okay? Which to me is a massive hole in the side of the integrity of the system. Nothing really that new here, but just know that the original document can be edited or deleted, okay? And that will create a duplicate copy of it in the preservation hold library. And that duplicate copy will contain the label. So now you've got a label on the original one, and the copy in the PHL also has the same label applied to it. Okay. So here is a look in SharePoint for a locked record, and there's a slider switch here for record status. The user just slides it to the unlocked position, and now it's unlocked. And it'll stay that way forever, unless and until somebody changes that. So this is what it looks like right here. This is a list of documents in SharePoint in a library called Documents. Pretty creative. And the label, also equally creative, is called is record. Okay. But it's unlocked, even though it's a record. Now, just above it, I can't resist the temptation to say this. This is your worst nightmare right here. You never, ever want to see this in SharePoint. How do you avoid it? By never publishing a label. That's the one catastrophic mistake you can make to ruin your EDRMS permanently, is publish a label. First time you do it, this button is awakened, and you don't ever want to see that button, because that means that now the users can pick any label they want at any time for any reason, and they can even override the records manager, and nothing we can do about it. Nothing at all. That's how you lose projects right there. Okay. How many documents exactly does Purview create when you're working away in the document? Well, here's an example. From Monday to Thursday, we advanced the document to 4 versions in SharePoint. Okay, so the document level version was up to version 4. That will yield 3 versions in the PHL. Okay, so in the SharePoint, I have only one copy, version 4. But in the preservation hold library, I have 3. So now I have 4 copies of that record instead of 3, instead of 1, right? So that leads to this reality. You better be careful. If you're going to allow this behavior in SharePoint, then how big can this PHL get? Well, here's some hypothetical examples. We have 1,000,000 records. Let's say 10 months has gone by. We've got 1,000,000 records. Let's say 20% of them people want to unlock and change. Or if it's not using records, if it's just a retention policy, which again, you must never use, but uh, if they're under retention, let's say 20% of them are edited. Well, that immediately yields 200,000 um, copies, preservation copies in the PHL, right? But let's go further. The number of copies in the PHL is not driven by the number of times they unlocked, it's driven by the number of revisions. So let's pick a number out of thin air, 3. Well, if there were 3 revisions of 20% of those records, then that means you're going to end up with 600,000 copies in the PHL. Total number of records, 1.6 million. Okay. Now, true story. I'm going to show you my OneDrive. Here's my OneDrive. Okay, for real. I have a 1 terabyte storage limit in my OneDrive. And about 3 months ago, I was using it, and all of a sudden it shut down. And it said, sorry, but your storage limit has been reached. What? I created the terabyte of data? I don't think so. So I looked into it. And sure enough, I only created 377 gigabytes. That's after like 15 years of work, whenever OneDrive first came out. So 377 gigabytes. I have a 1 terabyte license, yet it shut me down. So What happened? The preservation hold library was filled up with 770 gigabytes of stuff that none of which I put in there. I didn't even know that it was going on. So I thought, oh my goodness. So I'll just delete whatever's in the PHL. You can't delete it. So it took Microsoft 3 months to go into the back end, and they had to delete it. I couldn't. They said, well, you should be able to do it if you write PowerShell scripts. And we tried that, and it didn't work. There was an issue with the back end. So it took 3 months for Microsoft to work it out and finally delete that on my behalf. And they're not quite done yet. It's down to 62 gigabytes, but at least now I'm safe, right? So what's the story there? The story is be careful what you wish for. Okay? The PHL can eat you alive if you're not careful. So, retention. Where is the preservation hold library? For SharePoint, it's just a library, an ordinary library called preservation hold. No big deal. But it's hidden from the users. What about for Exchange? Now, I'm not an advocate of managing Exchange in place. I think emails should be taken out of Exchange and put into SharePoint to be managed. But anyway, if you're managing it in place, then with retention rules or policies or labels, then the copies are in the recoverable items folders in a subfolder called substrate holds. So this diagram, an official Microsoft diagram, shows what happens. During the retention period, if there's a change or a deletion to a document, a copy is stored in the PHL. And it stays there until the end of the retention period, the official retention period. So if it was a 5-year retention period, after 5 years, it moves out of there. 7 days later, it gets deleted. 7 days. So what about those that are not deleted? Well, they go through the normal path. At the end of the retention period, they go into the first stage recycle bin. And if somebody deletes it from there, we assume, or Purview assumes nefarious behavior. So it says, oh, you deleted it from the recycle bin? You probably could be up to no good. So what it does is it makes a copy in the second stage recycle bin, which users don't have access to. And then a total of 93 days, then it's gone. Okay. So quite a different pathway there. Now this is for email, much more straightforward. Um, it goes into after the retention period is up, or even before it's up. If you make a change, then a copy is made to the recoverable items folder. And people can delete from the recoverable items folder. So if they do try to delete it from there, then uh, it is moved to another secret folder, the PHL, and that's where it lives until the end of the retention period. After the retention period is up, 14 days later, it goes away. So this is all a lot of very bad news. Where's the fun in this, you say? Well, uh, thankfully, I used to be talking to Microsoft, and I said to them, look, guys, this whole record versioning thing is confusing to users, and it has a whole bunch of, back doors and holes in it. It's not very clean. I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to make everybody happy, but that often results in nobody being happy. So I asked for a way to get it turned off. So they did that. So if you go into the records management menu in Purview, click the settings gear, you'll see this. And this is what they put in at my request, actually. They said, okay, you can disable record versioning. So please make sure you do. If you disable it, in other words, you turn this switch off, its default is on. If you turn it off, then that means nobody can unlock a locked record. And guess what? No more preservation copies. Isn't that great? assuming, of course, that you're not using retention policies, which you should not anyway. Okay. So the whole problem can go away just with this simple switch right here. And needless to say, please turn that switch off. So here I did a little miniature compilation of rules of the game. Whoops. So I'll just bring a few points to your attention here. Don't forget that as of today, metadata can be edited and apparently will always be editable. Nothing we can do about that. If you have a document with a label on it, which you should, because the only safe way to do Purview is with uh, record labels. If you have a label on it, the copy that's made in the cloud also has the same label on it. So it's a duplicate, and the label is duplicated. Same label, different document. Co-authoring. So if you have three people working on a document in SharePoint at the same time, then that will also produce preservation copies if the document is under retention. And my final note from this screen is if you're going to use eDiscovery, then shouldn't eDiscovery search all the preservation copies as well? So the answer is, of course, yes. But it'll only do that if you select a switch in eDiscovery called All Versions. You have to set that in order for it to work. Very important point. So this is my summary, my conclusion. Number one is be careful. Preservation copies can massively expand your storage space and costs. And remember, if you have an average retention period of 10 years or so, then you're going to pay over 10 years, right? It's just going to accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. In my case, with my little single user OneDrive, it actually shut me down. It shut me down, right? I literally ran out of space. So you don't want that to happen. And remember, it's not free. There's no such thing as free storage from Microsoft, right? Uh, don't forget the difference between record versioning, which is new in Purview, and the good old-fashioned document versioning. They're different. They're not really directly related. Okay, so be aware of that, and uh, don't allow it. The cleanest way to deploy Purview is to avoid the things that give you grief and have no real reward, no real benefit. I don't see the benefit of allowing an unlock. I do not see it. So don't. Just don't do it. If you turn that feature off, this whole preservation hold library problem goes away. And that's what you should do. And don't forget that metadata will always be editable if Microsoft is to be believed, and I have to assume they meant it, right? So that's it. Thank you very much for attending. I very much appreciate the fact that you took a day out here. Not a day, but took a piece of your day. Really appreciate it. And check out both our YouTube channel, which is at EDRMS, no, sorry, at Bruce Miller EDRMS, and check out our training as well. If you really want to understand how this stuff works, then by all means consider training. Thank you again.